Thanks, everybody. Thank you for coming. Can I get a picture of you guys? Give me a sec. So, say awe, awe, and awe. There you go. Thank you. So yeah, my name is Chris Bobotis, and I work for an amazing company called Adobe. I've been in this industry, specifically media and entertainment, since, I guess, dinosaurs, specifically these dinosaurs. I come from a little town in Canada called Montreal in Quebec. So what's interesting about this production in particular is that a lot of the software that was used to help bring this, I guess, to the big screen and into your minds was created in Montreal, including Softimage, Discrete Logic, and a whole slew of other products. Montreal's an incredible, incredible place. We have some amazing talent, not only on the software but also on the content creation side. I was very fortunate enough early in my career to experience some incredible immersive theater by Montrealers that go by the name of Michel Lemieux and Victor Pilon. You've seen their work, believe it or not, in Cirque du Soleil and in other areas. They're incredible, just incredible, incredible creators. And as I say, I feel fortunate to have been around that, and I think it's influenced me heavily. So I come from content creation. I started my career in advertising, believe it or not. I made my way. They fast-tracked me and made me a creative director, fools that they are, very early on. I lasted in the industry, in advertising for about 7 years, at which point I extricated myself and became a facilitator. I started a little company in 1991 called Metal. We were facilitators. We were basically a SWAT team for ad agencies. So anytime they would hit a wall creatively or from a production standpoint, they would call on us to help them out. I adopted digital very early on, even though I wasn't trained in digital. I always saw digital as just another tool in my arsenal, right? I considered it like a pencil, a pen, a sculpting tool. It was the same thing for me. So building out a business like that, you start to build out tool sets for yourself to differentiate yourself and to create efficiencies for your company. These tool sets were really meant to help our little company, but in roundabout 2008, Adobe reached out to us because we created these tools specifically for After Effects and Premiere Pro since way back when. Roundabout 2008, 2010, Adobe reached out to us and asked us if we would bundle these tools with After Effects, which we happily did. Let's fast forward in time a bit now and get to 2015. 2015, around about the DK2 era. DK2, I'm referring to the Oculus Rift. We're still mostly a service business, but we're doing tool sets. One of our agency customers turned to us and asked us to help them tell stories in 360. There were no tools to help that along. Basically, what we did is we created a DIY solution to deliver stories in 360 VR at the time. We honestly thought that we would do maybe 10 to 15 projects during that year using these tool sets. But what ended up happening is round about that time, YouTube announced support for 360 VR. That's when I saw two behemoths basically pitted against each other, and I thought that immersive was here to stay, basically. So I turned to my partner, who's still with Metal, and I said, if we don't take this DIY solution and create products out of it, we'll probably regret it. Those products helped basically build out cinematic 360 VR as we know it today. So the interesting thing there is that Adobe approached us and bought the IP and asked me to join as Director of Immersive for what's known as DVA, or Digital Video Audio, at Adobe. So since then, the products have made what we call a tech transfer. They've made it into After Effects and Premiere Pro. With some incredible teams, we also launched support for panoramic or spherical in Photoshop. We announced Dimension, Adobe Dimension. If you haven't seen the Adobe or tried Adobe Dimension, it's part of your Creative Cloud subscription. Try it out. It's a very, very good take at 3D. Captivate support also announced support for 360 VR and interactivity. So these are all tools that are coming together as a portfolio or a family of products to help you out, to help you tell your stories. The next thing that came about was this incredible, the next thing we announced was Project Arrow. If you haven't seen Project Arrow, I'll just shut up at this point and play this video. I think you guys should be aware. So that's Project Arrow. Project Arrow will start its life in iOS. It's currently in beta. The idea is to build out applications for AR that serve our customers. So it's a very, very targeted and focused project. Speaking of projects, Project Arrow may not be the final name. This is like sort of a code name that we use internally. Who knows what we'll call it in the end? Branding has a strong say at Adobe. I encourage you, if you're here tomorrow morning, by all means, please check out a 9 a.m. Talk by Stefano, whose team leads this effort. They're doing phenomenal work, and you'll get a bit more detail and a lot more in depth with Stefano on our AR play, okay? So take note of that. The next thing that came about at Adobe is we announced the acquisition of Allegorithmic. How many of you are familiar with Allegorithmic products here? Okay, so we have a few. Some are calling it, and it's a big statement, but I'll repeat it because it's not that far from the truth. Some are calling the Allegorithmic products the Photoshop of the future. And in a way, that's true. They are the go-to solution for texture creation for 3D. So this serves gaming, of course, immersive content creation, film production, et cetera, et cetera. So the products that they're known for are Substance Designer and Substance Painter. The next product that we had just announced recently is Substance Alchemist. This is amazing. You need to try this out. So what Substance Designer Alchemist can do is you can actually take photos and it'll generate seamless procedural textures that you can use in your immersive content or in gaming or in your film production projects. This is a glimpse at the interface, and it is available for you to try out in beta as well. I think it's sort of a North Star for tool sets. We're trying to make things easier and easier and easier to do. The point I don't bring this to sell you, bring this up to sell you. I think it's a good indicator of my thesis, which is basically hardware and software really, really need to get out of your way and let you focus on what you do best. We at Adobe, and I consider you the craftspeople and the storytellers of this industry. No content, no medium. It's as simple as that to me. So anything that we can do to facilitate that, we're there. So VR, AR, MR, XR. There's so many definitions, so many takes on this. Some people consider VR sort of the domain of the Rift and the Vive, where we obstruct the world via these heads. AR is where we invite the world. MR is where we do a combination of both. XR is, what is XR? Is it extended reality? Is it cross reality? Quite frankly, I don't really care what that is. I think, the important thing that we need to focus on is one R. And that's the R, in my opinion, in immersive. I think it's a great umbrella term. I think the idea here is to use as many modern devices as you deem necessary. So that can include your mobile phone. It can include AR glasses that are coming our way, I suppose, in the next couple of years. It can include projection. It can include holographic screens that we see. It can even include IoT, for that matter, to create compelling experience. The key is to empower you as a content creator to help you tell your story, right? So as a tool set from Adobe and other companies, our job is to facilitate that, right? So back to 2015 now, when this agency client came to us and asked us to help with telling stories in 360 VR. It was definitely a technical challenge, but what got me really excited is the notion that we no longer depend on a frame or a screen. The screen in front of you, in essence, becomes the world around you. And this presents challenges, right? Previously, we would frame as directors or as storytellers. We had that frame that we can work with so that we can direct the gaze, and we had total control. All of a sudden, you're relinquishing control, and that would scare people, but it would excite others. So audio became even more and more important. What would happen to me in my travels, because I traveled the world extensively since we became a bit of a product company, is that I would always get this mic put into my face as a sort of like this authority. I don't consider myself an expert or authority. Quite frankly, I think that's nonsense. Anybody who calls themselves an expert is just kind of full of it. So a mic would be put in my face, and I would be asked the following question time and time again. What is VR? What is it cinema evolved? Is it a combination of theater and cinema? How are you defining this? How are you seeing this, Chris? And I wouldn't answer it until I was in New York at NYVR, and somebody put this microphone in my face, asked me, and the reason I didn't answer is because I was never quite comfortable with the answer that I had. Finally, it dawned on me, after a lot of background processing, I said, I don't think this is the evolution of cinema or theater. I think it's much more akin to dreaming than it is anything else. So the interesting and exciting thing for me as a storyteller is that I don't dream in a linear fashion. I dream in abstraction, and I'm very comfortable decoding. I'm very comfortable experiencing a lot more of that dream as opposed to being passive and laid back. So I think that's closer, and it creates a great opportunity for us to evolve storytelling, to come up with new techniques that can help that along, right? So I'm a sucker for non-linear narrative. I have been since I can remember. One of the things that we would do in school is, in my graduating class, I was tasked to lead a team, and basically we're trying to find new ways to tell stories. So what we did is, at the time, we would sort of storyboard and write on cue cards, what we called cue cards, right? So it's just a 4-inch by 6-inch little white card that you would storyboard on and write notes. So I would have the whole team write their whole story in a very linear way, much like any story that you would encounter. We would stack them up, and then I would encourage them all to grab that stack, throw it up in the air, and no matter which way it came back down, bring it together and thread that story. So now this gets interesting. This gets very, very interesting. So Does that look familiar? I got so excited by this film, I can't tell you, because all of a sudden, something that was a real niche or niche product, as some of you pronounce it, a niche notion became widely accepted by modern audiences. So that excited the hell out of me. And then getting to something like 360 VR, or at the time, got me even more excited because the medium lends itself even better to this, to nonlinear storytelling. Back to that notion that it's closer to dreaming than it is to any cinema or theater that we saw. The other thing that was very exciting was this. Again, the wide appeal. This is not new. None of these concepts are new. They've been around forever, right? And I think that goes back to the whole thesis of storytelling. A lot of what we need to do, so what we did as a little company that started to create tools is that we went back in time and we looked at cinema where a lot of people were disregarding cinema and saying, well, this is a new thing. You can't move a camera. You can't do this. Why can't I do what? This is too early to be setting rules. This is the time for experimentation. This is the time to fail. And as Mr. Zuckerberg says, fail big, right? So in that spirit, let's go back in time and start looking where some techniques and notions, how far back they actually go. So back to Georges Méliès. Some of you may recognize some of this content, some may not. If you don't recognize it, it's in your better interest. Take a quick pick, or I don't know if they're sharing these slides later on. Look up these properties. These are early pioneers in film. The Lumiere brothers. You might know them as for the Lumiere Awards right now. They were revolutionary. This is a whole new medium that's being brought to the masses in an interesting way that was extremely powerful. But as I said, we have a lot to learn. Immersive theater. This is not new. None of this is new. 1862, people were actually doing immersive theater way back when, finding a way to do this. The frame or the screen, how many different things have we filled that with? Is it a frame, is it a screen, or is it more than that? Here's another good example. A window serves as a screen or a framing. In this case, there's religion, right? So they're trying to tell you a story within this framework. It goes even past that. If we start going back to the Neanderthal days or early days of mankind, an entrance or an exit is a portal. It's much the same thing in storytelling. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the real challenge is not in technology. The real challenge always goes back to the story. Understand the medium, transcend the medium, because the story really happens in the mind. And to prove that, tools and techniques. We started to draw out things, we started to illustrate, paint out, tell our stories. This was interesting. And speaking of tools and techniques, back to our buddy over here. Who here remembers what the GPU, what the rage in GPUs were at that time? Nobody. Nobody that I can see. Who remembers what RenderMan shaders were important at that time and what brought this beast to life? Sorry. I don't see anybody. But that's my point. It's not about the tools. The tools are facilitators. They'll help. It's really about that story, understanding the medium, and bringing it, and not exploiting it, but finding a way to work within those constraints in the best way possible, and to use the tool sets available to you. To further that, use storytelling techniques like suspension of disbelief with very little or no tech or tools whatsoever. A great storyteller can sit you down in front of a fireplace and have you travel to the depths of the earth, the depths of space, have you look at other dimensions, have you see abstractions, tell you stories that take you away from the here and now and bring you to a place that they want. So Very little to no tech to do that. But understanding the context and the medium. Theater of the mind. This is interesting. This is a jargon that was made up by the radio community way back when. With only audio, they can do incredible, incredible things in storytelling back then, to the point, look up War of the Worlds and Orson Welles, where they had mass panic going across the United States, where people thought that there was actually aliens coming here. That's how powerful a story can be. So the real challenge, back to the real challenge. The real challenge is the storytelling. It's not the technology or the tools. There's motivated companies in hardware and software that are here to help that along. The real challenge, here's one. Tell a story in 6 words. I'll give you a second. Here's one man's take on that. See what happened there? That's interesting. With 6 words, this man took you from the here and now and brought you into a whole other place. Just 6 words. It's incredible. This starts to prove my point of the story really happens in the mind. It doesn't happen in a device, it doesn't happen in a medium. This is interesting. The real interesting thing here, I think, is the fact that the fingers don't touch. If they did touch, it wouldn't be as impactful or as powerful. So give it a second. So yeah, the real magic is happening right there. But what's happening here? What is Michelangelo trying to show in this depiction? It's basically the ethereal making its way to the corporeal and vice versa, right? That's important. So what do we mean by that? Mind to manifest, mind to matter, right? Idea to reality. There's that R word again, right? I think this is where the magic happens. This is where imagination lives. This is where you can make or break great concepts. This is where you can help your viewer transcend. And this is where I believe Adobe lives, to help you with things along. Questions? I'm a noob to this slide. If anybody has questions, I'm a noob to that part of it. How does that work? I guess there's no questions. Go. I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well. I'm terrible. Yeah.
That delivers such a sense of presence. What do we know about the brain that tells us what happens once we hit the region?
Oh, I wish I could answer that. I'm not a neurosurgeon, but I think a lot of it has to do with the closer we get to simulating our real world and emulating that, the richer the experience becomes, right? But I still go back to, if I can get you out of the here and now and into your mind, then a lot of the physicality goes by the wayside, right? Sick stuff versus not sick stuff. Full room experiences versus not. I've seen very simple things have people travel all over the place, right? From very simple pixelated animation on flat 2D screens, scratchbook animations, flipbook animations. I don't think the technique or the medium is really the solution. I think it still goes back to storytelling. So I hope that kind of answers your question. I'm not a neurosurgeon, as I said. When is Adobe Aero coming out of beta? I can't answer that, but the target is this year. I think, oh, we have one more. How do you craft storytelling for interactive media? Oh, wow, that'll take much longer to answer. But I'm around. If anybody wants to find me, I'll be at the back at the end of the thing. I can talk your ear off about stuff like that. I think that's it, question-wise, unless somebody else has something. No? We're good? So listen, I encourage you, if you take away anything from this talk, I encourage you to experiment. I encourage you to study the mediums. I encourage you to get to understand them and then create accordingly. One of the things that we learned in doing very early IMAX is we started to create everything on flat screens. I'm talking about first IMAX ever, right? So we're creating everything on these little 2D screens, these little monitors at the time, and we thought we were just freaking brilliant. We finished the whole production with like renderings that would take like a day per frame in 3D and all that. And then we had to do a test run in context in an IMAX theater. So we get it up on this massive screen, and guess what? Everything was wrong. We had to start everything all over again. Please don't repeat history. Thank you very much for your time.